Alright, welcome back to another video. Today we're installing an air oil separator on this beautiful all-wheel drive Mark II RS. Now the purpose of this video is a how-to installation, so you can follow along at home for when you're doing your installation. Now this guy was one of the first people to have one of the Mark III RS steering wheel conversion kits that I do. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out in another video. That's really cool too. So start by opening the bonnet. Everything's going to be done under the bonnet. We don't need to do anything on the interior. So what we're going to need to remove, and you can come over and have a look, we're going to need to remove the intake, your RS ECU enclosure if you've got one. This won't actually work with a stock intake, just because of where the routing of the hoses go, but most people installing this kit will have an aftermarket intake and ECU enclosure anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. So yeah, ECU enclosure, intake, battery box. As a result, we're going to need to pull off the wipers and this panel here. Okay, so all that's out. The intake doesn't have to be fully removed. We've just loosened it so we've got really easy access to everything in this area. And now that we've got everything out, I can show you the oil filter housing. This lid has a seal on top, and that is the easiest place for pressure to exit the engine when there's excess crankcase pressure. That's why you often see a leaking oil filter housing on these vehicles. Now, the sad reality is that probably means that the motor has got somewhat lower compression than what it should have had from the factory. But this is a great way to relieve that pressure and stop it from pushing oil past various other seals in the engine if it gets worse. So battery box is out. We've got the breather itself. We're going to trim it to make it all fit, drill some holes, put the bolts in, etc. So really where it's going to sit, this top end is going to sit up under this lip, but about 10-15 mil forward past here. So what I'm going to do is mark where my holes are going to be. So by putting that a bit further out than where it needs to be, but under the lip, drawing a dot for my hole with a Nico, and one on this other side as well. Now, by doing that, you'll see that it's actually on this rib here. So we're going to shave that down a bit so it's flat, and drill 2 holes, shave that down as well to make it all fit. And now that those bits are dremeled out, we can see that it physically sits flat on the battery box, and we can see it matches up with the marks that we put for where we need to drill our holes. I've gone ahead and drilled 2 pilot holes. You don't have to actually do that. It just makes it a bit easier before you go ahead and drill the full 10mm size. So that's what we'll do now. Now we can grab our hardware. So you can sit the breather on there. Spring washers go onto the bolts first. And then in here. Now on the other side here, I've put the nuts on and you can tighten everything up. What we're going to do now is install these fittings. I've got an AN wrench. If you don't have one of these, it will damage the powder coating a little. Optionally, you can use a normal spanner and just wrap some masking tape on it. So you can just thread them in just to get them going. Top, side, and bottom. And then just nip them up with your spanner. Then you can put your filter on top. Nip that up as well. And battery box is pretty much ready to go back in the car, just as it was before. Okay, now the battery box is back in, we're going to focus on the PCV hose going from the top of the cam cover down to the oil filter housing. From factory, they use these crimp style hose clamps. What you'll want to do is use a flathead screwdriver to pry that off, and we'll replace it with a standard hose clamp. These can be a bit of a pain to get off, but if you get a sharp screwdriver in there and pry it up, you can usually unlock them and they come straight off. Once you've done that, we're also going to pull this side of the engine cover off. That's a bunch of T30 screws, and you might need to loosen your intake like I have here. With the hose disconnected, we're actually going to pull it up through the top side now. Right, so here it is. It does not need to be disconnected from here. If you want to do it, that's okay. I've got a fresh, sharp blade that I'm going to use to cut through the hose. Now, if you come over to this way to the left a bit, you'll see there's a section where it starts going downhill. We're going to cut just before that. Now we've got our brass fitting. The smaller side goes in the hose we just cut. It might be a bit difficult if your hose is a bit old and stiff, but you'll be able to get it in. And now with the brass fitting installed, you can go ahead and get the large or longer hose that's included in the kit and install it onto the top of the oil filter housing where the 90 section goes down on there. Put a hose clamp on, then install this fitting into the breather and the short hose onto that fitting as well. So what we're up to now is the point of cutting the length of the hoses to be perfect to go to the breather. This top hose is pretty simple because it can't really be too long or too short. We're not going to have it all too tight. There's going to be enough slack here that it's not super tight. And then we'll come up here where the brass joiner ends. We'll cut the hose there, put it on. Now you can put a hose clamp on this if you'd like, but the seal is very tight, so you don't have to if you don't want to. Now that this lower hose is cut to length, I've actually gone ahead and removed this fitting to get easier access to put it on. So this is just pushed on, it's called push lock. And then once it comes up the end, it actually sits inside of this collar. So you can sort of help push it in there and then just slide it in all the way home. Now that's like that, you can feed it back under and screw it back onto the breather and tighten it with your AN tool or your spanner. With the hoses on, top and bottom, fittings tight, pretty much that's done. Everything here, that's on. You put your hose clamps on or not, that's up to you. Down here, it's got the hose clamp on it. It's nice, routed away from everything, not in the way of your ECU enclosure. Everything can go back to how it was before you started. So battery can go back in, plastic panel, wipers, cam cover, plastic cover, and that's basically it. Okay, everything's reinstalled and everything's finished up, looking great. What I should add is this particular person doesn't have a battery lid cover, so if you've got that, to get it reinstalled properly, it will need a bit of trimming, a bit of love. Also, if you live in states like New South Wales that are particularly funny about having open filters in the engine bay, there is a variant option on the website that includes some hose and another fitting to send the vent down the back, and you can zip tie it to the chassis or the subframe. That way nothing's visible and all looks legal. But if you're in states where they don't care as much, you can just get the variant with the filter and be good as gold.